Honorable members, welcome to
Reports from committees. Oral questions without notice.
Honorable members, at 12 o'clock today, we received a note from under this item. Honorable members, we do have some conventions, and for questions like these, our convention is that it be received, and this was a ruling going back, way back to the Honorable Speaker, Ralph Ramkaran, that these questions be submitted at least 3 hours before the sitting. But we also have the standing orders, and such questions should be urgent, and under that particular standing order B, I don't see that I can exercise any discretion in waiving the time limit and allowing for this question. It could properly be resubmitted to the respective minister. Sherlock?
Comrade Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Michael.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, the standing order I have does not specify the time requirement. So I believe there needs.
Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal, you were advised when you submitted the question by the clerk about the 3-hour limit. And we have a set of rulings by speakers which has been circulated. Sorry, not Mr. Mahipal. Mr. Jones, I am being informed by the clerk that the chief whip who submitted this was informed. Sherlock?
Questions on notice.
Honorable members, on today's order paper, there are 8 questions, and all of these questions are for written replies. Questions 1, 2, and 3 are in the name of the Honorable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson. Questions 1 and 2 are for the Honorable Minister of Housing and Water. And question 3 is for the Honorable Minister of Public Works. Questions number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are in the name of the Honorable Member, Mr. David Patterson, and are for the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources. The answers to these questions have been received and have therefore, in accordance with our standing orders, been circulated. The Honorable Member, Mr. Shearer.
I rise with your permission, Mr. Speaker, to raise a matter which I've sought your approval to bring before this House under Standing Order 32.3 with regards to privilege. On December 29th, 2021, this day will go down in the annals of the Guyana Parliament. The events during the debate on the Natural Resources Fund Bill have been recorded by the media, citizen reporters, by persons who are viewing the live streaming on that day. The evidence is overwhelming. This is recorded evidence that cannot be erased or forgotten. In fact, it was seen in Guyana, nationally and globally. Of special note, Mr. Speaker, is that the space between the government side and the opposition side is in any parliament considered the safe zone, the safe space, and any entrance without permission is interpreted as an act of aggression and a threat to the safety of the members of parliament. This we saw too by the opposition members en masse on December 29th. These events that transpired in this House the stealing and the damage to the mace of Guyana, the deliberate willful damage to the equipment of the Arthur Chung Convention Center, the control communication room, the assault on a member of staff, the repeated disregard for the Speaker and the authority of the Assembly require stern measures. As a consequence, sir, I have brought and sought your leave and I received your permission to bring a privilege motion, and I do so now. The motion reads as follows, Members of Parliament and Mr. Speaker. Whereas at the 34th sitting of the National Assembly, held on the 29th of December 2021 at the Arthur Chung Convention Center, members of the afternoon AFC coalition conducted themselves in a grossly disorderly, contumacious, and disrespectful manner, and in particular repeatedly disregarded, disrespected, and ignored the authority of the Assembly and that of the Speaker, thereby committing contempt and breaches of privilege. And whereas the following members, by conduct complained of above, attempted to prevent the second and third reading of the Natural Resources Fund Bill, number 20 of 2021. The Honorable Christopher Jones, MP, Opposition Chief Whip, the Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, the Honorable Sherrod Duncan, the Honorable Natasha Singh Lewis, the Honorable Annette Ferguson, the Honorable Viceroy Jordan, the Honorable Tabitha Saraboe-Haley, the Honorable Maureen Philadelphia. And whereas, Honorable Members, Annette Ferguson and Viceroy Jordan further committed breaches of privilege by forcefully, unauthorizedly, and in a disorderly fashion, removing the mace from its rightful position and attempting to remove it from the chamber, thereby creating grave disorder and chaos, which resulted in injuries to a member of staff of the Parliament office and damage to the mace. And whereas Honourable Member Tabitha Saraboe-Haley committed contempt and breaches of privilege by unauthorizedly entering the communication control room of the Arthur Chung Convention Center, which is the chamber, a part of the chamber of the National Assembly as proclaimed by His Excellency the President since September 2020, and destroyed several pieces of audiovisual equipment being public property with the intention to disrupt the sound and internet connection so as to affect the Assembly from conducting its lawful business. And whereas the House is reminded that the rules of order, Standing Order 47(1) to 10, sets out the authority of the Speaker in dealing with gross and grave disorder in the National Assembly and procedures therein. And whereas as the named members brought the image of the National Assembly of Guyana into disrepute at a level never witnessed in this House before, and set a shameful example by elected representatives to the public and particularly the young generation. Be it resolved that this National Assembly expresses the unwavering abhorrence of such gross disorderly conduct, contempt, and breaches of privilege which took place on December 29, 2021. Be it further resolved that this National Assembly commits the following 8 named members to the Committee of Privilege in accordance with Standing Order 32. Honorable Christopher Jones, Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, Honorable Sherrod Duncan, Honorable Natasha Singh Lewis, Honorable Annette Ferguson, Honorable Viceroy Jordan, Honorable Tabitha Saraboe-Haley, and Honorable Maureen Philadelphia. And be it further resolved, sir, that this National Assembly calls on the Privilege Committee, due to the seriousness of these violations, to act with alacrity and report to the National Assembly within 1 month from the date thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The matter is now referred to the Privileges Committee. Honorable members, Today, the clerk received two motions from the Honorable Chief Whip of the opposition. One, a no confidence motion in the Speaker of the National Assembly. That motion will go through the regular procedures. And secondly, there was a motion moved to send a number of members from the government side to the Privileges Committee. We received that motion this morning. Unfortunately, the motion to send members to the Privileges Committee was received with or on the letterhead of Leader of the Opposition press release. The clerk and I spoke, and the clerk informed the Chief Whip, and that motion was resubmitted just over an hour before this sitting. As such, I did not have an opportunity to review the matters raised, and I want to assure the honorable member, Mr. Jones, that that is going to be done expeditiously, and we will deal with his motion. Thank you. Mr. Isaacs?
Statements by ministers, including policy statements, personal explanations, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly and moved by minister, introduction of bills, public business, government's business.
Honorable members, we will proceed with the second reading of the Human Organ and Tissue
Mr.
Transplant
Speaker, I'm not being
Bill
acknowledged.
2021, Bill number 19 of 2021, published on December 15, 2021. Before I call on the Honorable Minister of Health, I see the Chief Whip for the opposition on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reference to the email you mentioned, I sent two emails to the clerk of the Assembly last evening. Both emails were not on the Leader of the Opposition's list.
Honorable Member,
I have
Mr.
that
Jones,
email.
we have the staff of the National Assembly here. We have the emails, and you can clarify that with them. Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, I rise to present the Human Organ and Tissue Transplant Bill 2021 for its second reading. This bill seeks to create an enabling legislative framework for cell, tissue, organ, biofluid transplantations, and for blood transfusion, the development of regenerative medicine, and the expansion of medical education and scientific research. Organ transplantation is not a new phenomenon. For more than a century, surgeons have replaced diseased organs with healthy ones, and in the process have been able to perfect surgical techniques, organ preservation, tissue typing, and now even we're doing xenotransplantation. Over the years, transplants have helped to extend the life expectancy of many patients, and as expected, and has been accepted as the best therapy for patients with terminal and irreversible organ failure. In 2020, the Global Observatory on Donation and Transplantation estimates that there were 129,681 solid organ transplants which were done in the world. 80,926 kidneys, 32,586 livers, 8,101 hearts, 5,940 lungs, 1,970 pancreases, and 158 small bowel transplants. Mr. Speaker, all the experts agree that transplantation is the best therapy for patients with end-stage organ failure. After successful transplant, the patient's clinical condition would significantly improve, along with the attendant comorbidities. These clinical changes help improve the patient's quality of life, and in many instances, these patients can return to everyday life and improve life expectancy. Several studies have shown that for patients with end organ failure, that transplant is often the most cost-effective form of treatment. Mr. Speaker, philanthropist, the late George Sobraj, was a very strong advocate for organ transplant. He funded several medical missions to Guyana, first to assess the state of patients with end-stage renal disease, and then to work on the development of a dialysis program, which eventually led to the first kidney transplant by Dr. Raul Jindal and his team on the 12th of July, 2008. Between 2008 to 2014, there were 30 kidney transplants using living donors that were done here in Guyana. These early transplant surgeries were done at the Balwant Singh Hospital. These pioneering surgeries gave hope to a lot of patients, but it also inspired many of our local doctors to take up the field of transplantation. One such doctor, Dr. Kishore Prasad, was sent to Canada to train in organ transplantation. And upon his return in 2015, the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation established a transplant unit under his leadership. The GPHC team has successfully transplanted 36 patients who were diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. The survivability of these patients have improved tremendously. This program has given hope to patients with end-stage renal disease because many of them can now access this program. Currently, Mr. Speaker, there are close to 200 patients receiving dialysis, requiring at least 3 sessions per week. Many of these patients are unable to work because of the type of illness that they have, and transplant would certainly be able to change the outcome for these patients. Mr. Speaker, the successes of our homegrown program have attracted Caribbean-wide attention. You would recall that in July last year, Dr. Bristol of Grenada came to Guyana, came to the Georgetown Public Hospital, and had a successful kidney transplant that was done there. At the press conference, she said that to receive such a surgery in other jurisdictions would have cost her close to $400,000 US. But we did it here in Guyana for free. Since this type of surgery, right now, several other countries are now inquiring whether they can send patients to us here in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, apart from solid organ transplants, such as kidney, the George Sobraj Foundation also funded a corneal transplant program. A corneal transplant replaces a diseased cornea with a new one. When the cornea becomes cloudy, light cannot penetrate the eye to reach the retina, and therefore that person would have poor vision, often resulting in blindness. In corneal transplant, the surgeon removes the central portion of that cloudy cornea and replaces it with a clear cornea. This program also was started by Dr. Jindal, but was also done with the help of Dr. Joseph Pasternak and Stephen Waller, who initially in 2014 performed 6 corneal transplants, again at the Balwant Singh Hospital. The transplanted corneas were acquired from an eye bank in the United States, and after these successful surgeries, the program was transferred to the Georgetown Public Hospital. Dr. Shailendra Sugrim and a local team of doctors were trained on corneal transplantation techniques. To date, the local team spearheaded by Dr. Sugrim have completed 93 corneal transplant surgeries right at the Georgetown Public Hospital. Cornea transplantation, Mr. Speaker, corneal transplantation has been a game changer for many patients who a generation ago would have been blinded permanently. They now can have their sight restored with a corneal transplant. Currently, the cost of such a transplant ranges from $13,000 US to approximately $27,000 US. Unfortunately, the cost of a cornea is very prohibitive for most patients. This legislation would allow the development of a local eye bank, which would recover and store ocular tissue from donors for transplant to eligible recipients. This measure will assist hundreds of persons in regaining their sight at a very affordable cost. Mr. Speaker, we all know that blood transfusion is a very indispensable part of the practice of medicine in Guyana, both for medical purposes and for surgical purposes. Before 1990, there were several private and public blood banks which collected and transfused whole blood. This was a very inefficient use of blood, and in many instances did not allow for a robust standard in preventing transfusion-transmitted infections. In the 1990s, a national blood transfusion service was developed in the public sector with the assistance of the World Health Organization, the European Union, and later the US government through the PEPFAR initiative. In the early 1990s, Guyana was able to move away from whole blood, and we have started doing the separation of blood components, such as red packed cells, platelets, and plasma. And then in the 2000s, with the funding from PEPFAR, we developed a robust program to prevent transfusion-transmitted infections, such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, cytomegalovirus, syphilis, human T lymphotropic virus, Chagas, malaria, and microfilaria. Mr. Speaker, the blood bank can also now produce specialized blood products, such as leuko-reduced packed cells, platelets, pool cryoprecipitate apheresis platelets, and wash red cells. We have also changed the pattern of blood collection from families of patients donating most of the blood to moving to 98 to 100% voluntary blood donation. There's no doubt that transfusion medicine has saved countless lives in Guyana. Now the blood bank is contemplating the next wave of development, and that is to do blood fractionation. That is to look at various fractions of the blood, such as to be able to produce factor VIII, which is necessary for hemophiliacs, without which, if they don't get the factor VIII, they can bleed to death. Mr. Speaker, while we have transfused blood for several decades, and we have been transplanting kidneys since 2008, and we have been transplanting corneas since 2014, there has been no legal framework in place. Mr. Speaker, transplant medicine and transfusion medicine has undergone extensive transformation. In the early days of transplant medicine, surgeons struggled to prevent organ rejection. Immunology research has given us new knowledge on how to successfully suppress the recipient immune system using immunosuppressant medicine. Newer techniques are now paving the way to grow organs and to prevent rejection. We are now transitioning from the traditional way of doing transplantation into an era of regenerative medicine. New research is now pointing the way to that future of patient care. In a book on organ repair and regeneration, Paula Briselis and team describe how the transplant landscape is changing and how it's moving away from the traditional to regenerative medicine. And I just want to give a little quote here. And that is, they said, progress in cell and extracellular matrix biology, in biomaterial science, and in the developmental biology, in cell and tissue physiology, have paved the ground for the development of technologies that, when mature, will enable organ on demand, whereby organs will be manufactured for patients using their own cells. When this is achieved, Mr. Speaker, no immunosuppression would be needed. No waiting lists would be necessary. No preservation of organs would be required, as these organs, tissue or cells, would be manufactured on demand and implanted immediately. This bill would allow us, our scientists, our researchers, our clinicians, to start researching and exploiting the benefits of regenerative medicine. Mr. Speaker, one of the applications of regenerative medicine is cell-based therapies. Cell-based therapies treat, repair, replace diseased organs and tissue with new and healthy and functional ones. The discovery of stem cells and their capabilities, their capacity for self-renewal and differentiation has led to cell-based therapies, drug discoveries, and tissue engineering. Currently, cell-based therapies are used to treat hematological disorders such as myeloid leukemia, lymphoma, sickle cell anemia, immune deficiencies, and beta thalassemias. It has also been used in wound healing and skin injuries. It has also been used in neurological disorders such as Parkinson's disease and spinal cord disorder. It has also been used in autoimmune disorders such as multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, and type 1 diabetes. Cardiac diseases, including ischemic heart diseases, have also benefited from cell-based therapies. And ocular disorders, such as macular degeneration and retinitis pigmentosa, have also benefited from this type of therapy. Bone diseases, such as osteosarcoma, osteoporosis, and osteoarthritis, are also targets for cell-based therapy. Cell-based therapies, Mr. Speaker, are among the most exciting and revolutionary medical advances in the 21st century. It is providing new hope for many patients, and this bill provides the use of this type of therapy in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this bill is in keeping with the revised WHO guiding principles on human organ and transplantation, and all 13 of these guidelines are reflected in the various sections of the bill. The bill will establish a human organ and tissue transplant agency which will oversee all future
Yes, we are live. We're looking at a shot of the sitting of the National Assembly, the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, the Minister of Health, speaking on the organ transplant bill there. For those persons who don't know, join us. My name is Randolph Critchlow. We are going to be following this broadcast throughout the day as we bring to you what is happening at Parliament. Some notable things would have already happened in this sitting. Of course, we had the Honorable Gail Teixeira presenting her motion to move some of the opposition MPs to the Privileges Committee, and of course, asking in that motion that the Privilege Committee in a month's time basically give a ruling on the whereas clauses in the motion. Folks, of course, this stems from what happened on the 29th of December during that debate on the natural resources bill, where things got a bit testy in Parliament as the opposition MPs protested the ramming through of the natural resource bill without enough consultation, with enough it wasn't even moved to a special select committee, so the opposition MPs staged their protest. And of course, the government chief whip, this Gail Teixeira, of course, bringing that motion today, seeking to have a number of opposition MPs sanctioned. I think we still looking at a live shot there of what is happening in Parliament as we speak. Earlier, you saw the motion being read by Gail Teixeira. Interestingly enough, of course, the opposition, folks, the opposition would have submitted two motions to the National Assembly, which is supposed to be read today. The Speaker of the National Assembly said that there was some clerical error with the motion in that it was submitted with a letterhead from the APNU AFC, some sort of mix-up like that. The opposition chief whip, Christopher Jones, stood and tried to clarify that issue. He was then shut down by the Speaker, of course, so we don't know where we are on the two motions. Of course, two motions submitted by the opposition. One, of course, expressing no confidence in the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the other seeking to have the Privilege Committee sanction those members of the government side who were behaving in an unparliamentary manner. Of course, similar motion that was brought by Gail Teixeira this morning. We're supposed to be joined by some MPs so we can get some more insight and perspective on what happened or what has played out this afternoon in Parliament there. Of course, we are still listening to Frank Anthony on reading that, submitting that bill from the Ministry of Health. Of course, going through all of the details there. But importantly, folks, we are going to be focusing on the issues surrounding the motion submitted by the opposition and that motion submitted by the government seeking to sanction and move those members of the opposition to the Privileges Committee. That bill was submitted and it was read by Gail Teixeira. So I think we have some persons standing by. I think we have Mark Benchcup standing by. Of course, ready and willing to offer his opinion and perspective on what is playing out in Parliament. Mark, good day and welcome to the program.
Hi, welcome, and thank you so much.
MP Ricky is here with us. Thank you very much for joining. Mark, let's start with you. Another day in Parliament, and we see opposition motions being denied. Where are we going? What is happening?
Well, this is not surprising at all, Randy. Good afternoon to you and your listeners. Good afternoon to the Honorable MP, Ramstroop as well. It's not surprising. In fact, when I listened to the part that the Speaker of the National Assembly actually unloaded his rhetoric and this facade of a democracy and transparency in Parliament, it is
Mark,
not there
we're
at all.
Sorry. Let's go to Parliament. MP, we're listening to you because I think Mark had some technical issues there. MP?
Yes, I mean, Randy, thank you for having me. And just a little update. I mean, as I predicted, I went on a program on the 7.1 FM this morning, and I told Gabriela that we don't expect anything better, and so was it. I mean, we're here. We saw the motion that was ready, government chief with. We have our two motion. I mean, come on. I mean, the letterhead, whatever letterhead, but there was a second email that was sent in terms of correction of that, and they didn't really pay attention to it. But if there's a slight mistakes, they would have put the motion out, because the motion is one was to have no confidence against the speaker, and one is that there are 8 members of the government also supposed to be sanctioned or sent to the Privilege Committee, like our members were sent. I mean, I don't know that we don't expect anything. So, business is coming as business as usual, and this is the kind of bipartisan things that we're talking about. You understand me? I mean, if you want to have good dialogue and you want to have a system that is running smooth, then you have to some sort of, the bipartisan. You're trying to best to have both sides put the case forward, and you send both to the Privilege Committee. So, I mean, Randy,
So, let's just clarify here. You are saying that the correct email was sent to the speaker. You can confirm to us that the speaker received the correct email in the stipulated time span.
Yes, and Chris, after Chris was shut down, our chief was shut down. Chris took the computer and took the email and showed him. Went across and showed him and verify that. So
yeah.
So
again, these are some of the reasons why the speaker, of course, is facing this no confidence motion. But I want to bring Mark in here, and let us go back to December 29th, Mark. And it wouldn't have been the first time that we saw uproar in Parliament. What are you? I don't know if you're hearing me, Mark. Right. It wouldn't be the first time we heard uproar in Parliament. What are your thoughts on what happened on that day?
Well, it's always a facade whenever the PPP is in control of the National Assembly. They don't believe
Mark,
in
hearing
democracy.
us?
Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear. Are you hearing me?
Mark is not there. MP, you were in Parliament on the 29th, of course. The statement by the leader of the opposition last evening basically defended the actions of the MPs. I think we have Mark again. Mark, your thoughts on what
Yeah.
happened on the 29th?
Well, on the 29th, the PP, you're hearing me now, right? Yeah, thank you so much. On the 29th, it was basically a circus on the part of the PPP. And it was sad, very sad to watch that circus and the PPP try to put this sort of curtain over people's face into believing that they believe in democracy. There is no democracy in there. You have a Speaker of the National Assembly who wants to do
Lots of technical difficulties there, but as we said, MP, you were there on the night. Mark,
Randy,
I don't know if it's our internet or your internet, Mark.
It's not my internet. I paid my internet bill.
Randy, I think we are hearing Mark. We're hearing Mark loud and clear. I don't know if it's coming from your end, but Mark, you can go ahead. I mean,
Randy's end. But
Okay.
Randy, if I may continue though, on that day, it was just a circus. The Speaker of the National Assembly is not a fair guy. He doesn't believe in democracy. And we watched him play it out, not only on the 29th, when they conducted that illegal activity in the passage of that questionable bill. There were members of parliament who were standing. There wasn't the correct mace there, and all of these matters. But I hope that the opposition will confront these matters legally. Now, what transpired today with some letterhead and all this nonsense, we saw the Speaker of the National Assembly trying to pretend as though he's fair. We saw that he shut down that motion that was proposed by the Chief Whip, Christopher Jones. We saw that the Speaker of the National Assembly tried to do all manner of things to make it appear as though the right procedure wasn't followed. And then once the right procedure is followed, they will hear it expeditiously. That's another facade. The Speaker of the National Assembly doesn't believe in freedom of, doesn't believe in democracy, and he shoots down almost everything the opposition members of parliament put forward. So it's just a circus again, just a circus.
Yeah. Yeah, as we discussed what's happening, I think we will be joined. I want to hear from the opposition chief whip on this matter. I don't know if we have we are being joined by MP Natasha Singh Lewis. MP Lewis, your take on what has happened. I heard your name, by the way. You are being sent to the Privileges Committee. You are part and parcel of what happened on the 29th. What do you have to say for yourself, MP Singh Lewis?
Good afternoon, Randy, and good afternoon to your viewers and listeners. Present. I was present. I did what the people of Guyana asked me to do, and that is to stand up and to represent them, to represent their interests in the National Assembly. Now, what the Speaker would have done today, through a motion raised by Gail Teixeira, is to send 8 of us to the Privileges Committee. My opinion of that motion is that it's frivolous and it seeks to instill fear in the members of Parliament on the opposition side. But let me say to all of Guyana that I am a proud Muslim woman who fears God Almighty alone. And there is absolutely nothing that the PPP can do that will deter me from doing what I have to do, and that is to represent the people of Guyana. So Gail and Mansour can do whatever they want, and I will do what I have to do. And that's my position on it.
Randy,
Yes, go ahead, MP.
In addition to what Natasha is saying here, they are trying all their best to silence us individually. Personally, they're coming after our MPs. Personally. If you know, Randy, I don't want to go away from the topic because we got to talk about the budget yet. and what they wanted to do and what they're trying, what the narrative they're putting to us now. Every opportunity they are trying to divert the attention away from the real issue. And they are very good at it, and that is what they're doing. They keep fooling and hypnotizing the support base. They are trying to divert the attention from everything that needs to happen. And that thing needs to stop. And Guyanese people need to wake up and see this sort of governance and this sort of attitude that the P is carrying. And it's disgusting.
MPs, let me go back because I want to talk about the 29th and what actually happened in the National Assembly, because I don't think Guyanese understand. We see the headlines and we see the grabbing of the mace, but the question needs to be asked: why was it that the opposition MPs needed to go to that length? Why is it that we have a parliament with an opposition that is basically not being listened to, not being heard? I mean, this issue of the National Resource Fund was a very public one, where lots of other agencies outside of the opposition were saying, look, you don't push through this thing. But I mean, I was there, you were there, and it seemed as though they were bent on pushing this thing through. And the opposition MPs, who are basically the last line of defense to the Guyanese people and the Guyanese patrimony, took a stand. What is your position on what happened that day? Given that now that you're going to be sent to the Privileges Committee, do you regret taking that stand?
Randy, no, because you know what? You have to the government, the citizens of this country need to understand you represent over 50% of these people in this country. You understand? And not only that, we are representing the entire country when we went and started up that day. Because you know what? We are entering into a phase of the fourth theft. You understand? Of true democracy. Imagine the civil society call on the government to have this thing for further delay, at least 2 weeks. Our chief whip, Christopher Jones, stood up and said, can we put this special select committee? You know what their excuse were? Is that whenever we got to the special select committee, and we never get it to be heard. But they are in control now. So why they can't get it heard? Now, the other points are in the natural resources bill is that it was so at that moment and that time, there was nothing planned on this here. But as you said, Randy, it was our last line of defense. We were trying our best to have this bill deliberately, peacefully, to have it sent to the special select committee for deliberation and for deliberation, to ensure that we add what we wanted to add into that bill. But what they want, they remove the 22 members oversight committee that we had. And I want to say this here. The oversight committee members we had was representation from all 10 regions, region 1 to 10. We had the religious organization. We had the interland communities. We have the civil society. We have the people
Part of
from
the Accountants, University of Guyana,
right.
Women's
People-
Society. Yeah.
That's right. And it has to come through what we call project design. So whenever there's a project, so there's no way you have a 3-man or a 5-man controlling this and a person who will be selected by the president. He select the chairman of that committee, which now will be controlled. And you know what? This thing that the narrative that they're pushing to say that, the money will come to Parliament. They will bring it to Parliament, but they will using the one-seat majority again to pass it. No matter what question we ask, no matter how much questions we ask, it will never be answered. And they will use the one-seat majority to pass it. So, for example, let me put this in a simple term. We have witnessed the PVP. We have witnessed that they have invest $200 million to the Skeleton Sugar Factory. What is stopping them from putting another $200 million to that factory? And it will fail already. We have seen them put $50 million US to the specialty hospital that disappear. You didn't see a piece of that thing. It's just the grass probably growing there now. We have seen them put $80 million US in a fiber optic cable project that failed. We have seen the hydro project fail. They totally ignore the exports contribution towards those projects. So what is stopping them now to put another field project? You understand,
MPs,
Randy?
yeah, I hear you loud and clear. And again, I get the sense that you don't regret taking a stance on that day, on the 29th. I wonder if Mark is still with us, because I wanted to have his opinion here. I don't know if the operator still has Mark Bench up on the line with us. Doesn't seem so. MPs, as we see the opposition MP, Dr. Karen Cummins, on the floor right now, and we get ready for budget 2022. We get ready for budget 2022. If I start with MP Natasha Singh Lewis, what are your expectations? Because a lot has been said about the lack of consultation, especially at the regional levels, for things to be included in the budget. What are your expectations come on Wednesday?
All right. So, Randy, let me tell you, Sunday, a peaceful Sunday. Ashley Singh was on television, the NCN television, giving a preview of the budget. And I swear to God, I had to endure all of that because I wanted to know what is it that they're going to bring different, given the resources that they have now compared to what we had and what we did. And as my friend Jurita said, she too listened, and I concurred with her. We will have to start eating infrastructure. We're going to got to eat the roads, and we're going to got to eat whatever they're building all over the place, because according to them, physical things, the infrastructure work that they're putting up, that is progress for Guyana. That being said, let's talk about what is development for Guyana. When you develop your most important resource, that is the human resource, that is how you're going to develop a country. Then we can start to measure development. Now let's look at that statement. Let's look at what the public servants are going to receive, what they have received in the last 2 years. Well, 16 months. Absolutely nothing. 7% with the rising cost of living is absolutely nothing. Let's look at what they have done incrementally for senior citizens and across the board. What have they done? As my colleague Sharad would say, it's a hamper nation. Recently, they've started to give the teachers hampers who tested positive for COVID. What is that doing for our human resource? How are we moving from a failed sugar industry to a developing IT nation? That's as simple as it can get. That's a very simple question. How are we moving? How are we progressing? We continue to employ and to pay those people in the sugar industry that has failed. We continue to pay them a lot more than we are paying the public servants. We are using the police and well, I can say the joint services to do cleanup of Guyana. What are we doing to our human resource?
Yeah. MP, I know that you are
in short, the public servants, the people of Guyana can expect little or nothing in this budget.
Yeah. I know that you are the Shadow Minister of Human Service, Human Service and Social. Give me the correct heading there. I see we have
Human
MP.
Services and Social Security.
Social Security. Thank you very much. Human Services and Social Security. And of course, that's something that we were commenting on for a while now, that the lack of focus on human and social development.
Yes.
I see we have the Chief Whip here. Chief Whip, thank you very much for joining this afternoon. Of course, persons were looking just now when the motion by the opposition was basically passed over by the speaker, claiming some clerical issue with a letterhead. Do explain to the public what actually happened and why didn't we hear the reading of the opposition motion submitted?
Right. Thank you very much, Randy. And as a result of what transpired, we are now, that is, the members of parliament are analyzing something that has occurred. Apparently, our emails are not secured, but I'll elaborate a little bit more on a subsequent program. So last evening, two motions were submitted by the opposition to the clerk of the National Assembly, both of which was not on any letterhead. Both were submitted. Subsequent to that, last evening, an updated motion was set. Unfortunately, on that updated motion, it came on a letterhead. This morning, the clerk reached out to me and indicated that one of the motion has a letterhead and we would need to remove that. Within 10 minutes, it was removed and it was sent to the clerk of the assembly, who acknowledged receipt of the motion. Now, the speaker's argument is basically the argument that we've seen many times before. The speaker would simply claim that he hasn't had the opportunity to read it. Now, the motion essentially is about 4 or 5 lines, and then it names the PPP members of parliament who we are asking to go to the Privileges Committee. It's a total of 22 of them, which includes the Prime Minister of Guyana, which includes Madam Gail Teixeira, Anil Nandalal, just to name a few. But again, in terms of the motion, the speaker said that he will look at it at another time. Now, we are reviewing the standing orders. The standing order doesn't say that at the commencement of the House, that is the only opportunity in which the motion could be tabled. So we can break for lunch this afternoon, and when we recommence, we could bring that motion again, which we intend to do, because as I mentioned before, the motion has been submitted. Both motions are in order and they have been submitted since last evening, save and except for an update that was done on the motion to send the PPP members to the Privileges Committee, which was sent with a letterhead attached. And of course, as I mentioned, that was subsequently corrected. What is noteworthy to note is that the motion of no confidence in the speaker has been accepted. The speaker himself in the House earlier today alluded to that motion, that he has received that motion, and that motion will go through the normal procedure. Now, that simply means it will have to await the 26 days for the notice, and of course, makes its way onto the order paper, in which we will have the opportunity to debate it. So, significantly, that should be out there, that the motion of no confidence in the Speaker of the National Assembly has been received, and the Speaker of the Parliament of Guyana has acknowledged the same. Now, whether or not that motion will make it to the order paper, well, time will tell. Because when you look at the track record of the Speaker of the National Assembly as it relates to not only motions, but petitions, questions, bills that have been submitted by the opposition, most of all of those essentially, or rather I should be fair and say most of it, or I should say 20% of them have made it to the order paper. There are still motions of no confidence in the Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony, which was submitted between the months of July and August, and to date, it has not made it to the order paper. There is a motion of no confidence in the Minister of Security, Robeson Ben, which has been submitted between the months of August, September. It has not made it to the order paper. There is a petition that was submitted by Member of Parliament Sherwin Holder, representing the vendors, market vendors at Anna Regina, and that petition was allowed. There was a petition that was submitted by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Lennox Schumann, and this was given representation to organizations, civil society, that called upon the government to delay the passage of the Natural Resource Fund. That too was disallowed by the Speaker. There is the motion that was brought to bring for the National Assembly to extend condolences to the family of Henry Boyce. That motion was submitted in the year 2020, And to date, as we speak, the motion has not made it onto the order paper. There is motions that were submitted by David Patterson as it relates to the gas and oil industry. That motion, one of it was, we were told that it is a case of sub judice, meaning that the matter is before courts, and as such, we cannot debate it. We had the former Speaker of the National Assembly, Raphael Trotman, who argued that that is not necessarily the case as it relates to this particular motion. But as the Speaker of the Assembly, Mansour Nadir, would have it, the motion has not seen the light of day. So as it relates to a motion of no confidence that was brought on the Speaker himself, it leaves for time to determine whether or not he will allow a motion of no confidence in himself, to make it onto the order paper. But the evidence to substantiate our claim for no confidence in him are large. There are lots of evidence. I just mentioned to you a few. I didn't even go into the points about questions that were submitted by several members of parliament, and those questions were simply disallowed. They were edited and watered down to nothingness, essentially, and the list goes on. There are times in which you seek clarity in the House, clarity in terms of you just standing as an MP, seeking clarity from the Speaker of the National Assembly, and he simply disallows you. Today in the House, the Speaker is making the point that the motion to move the members to the Privileges Committee was submitted on a letterhead. I, the seconder of the motion, rise to my feet to indicate to the Speaker that an updated motion was submitted hours before the sitting of the National Assembly. I stood there in my place with the microphone on, and you should note that once you press the microphone, a signal is sent directly to the Speaker that a member has risen, and therefore the Speaker will acknowledge that person. The Speaker, Mansour Nadir, continue business as usual, as if he hadn't seen a 6'2" tall, handsome member of parliament standing in direct of his line of sight. You know, he pretended that he didn't see me and just went about his business. There were also incidents in which the leader of the opposition rose to his feet to make a point, and the Speaker just simply disacknowledged the leader of the opposition. So when we talk about the motion of no confidence in the Speaker, it is that plus many more instances of grave infraction by the Speaker, is clear biasness, is non-impartiality as it relates to the conduct of the sitting of the Assembly. Now, just earlier, my two colleagues, Natasha Singh Lewis and Dionarayan Ramsaroop, were making the point as it relates to what transpired on the 29th of December. Now, you have a sitting of the Assembly. The Speaker should be that middle person, that voice of reasoning to bring clarity on both sides. You have one side of the House that is standing and making noise, all of which is to gain the Speaker's attention. But the Speaker removed his cap as the Speaker and put on his cap as a PPP party member, activist, that as far as he's concerned, his party business is paramount. So irrespective of 31 opposition members of parliament, that represents just about 50% of the populace of this country standing and making noise, the House was in chaos. You had all members of parliament, inclusive of the government members, standing to their feet. And despite that, you will expect that the Speaker, who has to ensure that the House is in some semblance of order, suspend the sitting, have conversation with the whips, have some semblance of order, and then you restart sitting. But instead of that, the Speaker, as I said, put on his political cap. He said, listen, y'all could shout, jump, scream, blow whistles, well, everybody standing on the feet, bare chaos and confusion in the House, but his party's objective must be achieved. That's what we saw on the 29th. So the Speaker fumbled the ball not only on the 29th of December, but all of those subsequent months and weeks before leading up to this day. And including as it relates to this chapter, is that, as I mentioned before, you sought many times before to get the attention of the Speaker. You've brought motions, you've brought questions, you've brought bills, you've brought petitions, which were either disallowed, not acknowledged, or some frivolous excuse about I haven't seen it yet, I haven't had an opportunity to read it. Ah, man of stupidness. And forgive me for using this language, because that is the best way that you can describe the modus operandi of the Speaker. A bunch of stupidness as it relates to disallowing petition motions, bills, etc. that comes from him. I have had the opportunity to view parliaments, the 9th Parliament, the 8th Parliament, having an opportunity to sit as a member of Parliament in the 10th Parliament, having an opportunity to see the 11th Parliament, and now sitting here again in the 12th Parliament, albeit as a public relations officer at that time. So I've had that unique opportunity to sit and listen to former speakers such as Ralph Ramkaran when you've had heated debates in the House, and you would see this man manage the affairs of the Parliament, even though they are raucous and whatever the case be, but he brings order to the House and then it proceeds. Then, of course, I had the opportunity to see Raphael Trotman, former Speaker of the National Assembly, did same. I've had the opportunity to see Bartland Scotland as well. I can say to your viewers now that there were 7 petitions that were brought under the speakership of Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, all of which was allowed. All of which was allowed. There were 5 petitions that were brought under the speakership of Raphael Trotman, all of which were allowed. And just for the benefit of your viewers, let me just allude to what is a petition. A petition is not a bill, it's not an act, it doesn't become law or anything of that sort. It is a constituents. Whether it's market vendors, in case of the folks from Diana Regina, it could be organizations, civil society, and so forth, wanting their voice to be heard at the highest level of decision making. That is a petition. And they will submit their petition, they will sign to that. And that petition is simply read out. That the persons in let's say Port Kaituma has raised issues as it relates to potable water and children getting, you just simply read that out. At the end of that, you say thank you. The motion is then captured in the Hansard, and that is the end of the petition. That is the end of the petition. It is that simple. But even those simple things as petition, in the case of the current speaker, 2 of which has simply been disallowed. One, speaking on the issue that the vendors at the Anna Regina market are going through, and the second one was civil society organization calling for the Natural Resource Fund to be delayed in the passage to allow for more consultation. Just those examples I give you. There's a difference between a party political activist and a speaker of the National Assembly of any country, and what's expected of him or her.
Thank you very much, MP Christopher Jones, Chief Whip there, giving us quite a lot to think about what has been happening there with the the Speaker of the National Assembly. I see we're being joined by MP Sarah Bull Haley, and we want to bring her in because her name was called. You know, the people say your name calling, MP. You, of course, one of the names called to be sent to the Privileges Committee for destruction, you know, of public property. Your thoughts on the motion today, MP?
Well, I would like to say that I have no idea what Madam Gail Teixeira is speaking about. I'm not accepting any of those things that she would have stated. But I wanted to make something very clear. As members of Parliament, we have an obligation to the people of Guyana. We are here not representing ourselves, we are here representing the interests of the people of Guyana. And leading up to the 29th, it was clear. The people of Guyana wanted more time. They requested more time in a number of different ways. We had a number of organizations who said, please wait, hold up, let's get some chance to look at it and get some further consultations. We had a civil society group that sent a petition to Parliament. We had numerous letters to the editor requesting some more time to review this current the bill that has been illegally turned into an act. And so when we got into Parliament on the 29th, we got in recognizing that the majority of the citizens of this country were requesting and asking government to give them some more time before they dealt with this particular natural resource fund bill. And so the decision that we made on the 29th was what we felt was in the best interest of representing the people of this country. The individual accusations that came out today by Gail Teixeira, I think any of our members of Parliament are accepting those things, and if the Privileges Committee meets, when it meets, we will deal with that there. But that is what I will say at this particular point on that particular issue.
Thank you for that. I mean, I want to press you on not only the conduct of the speaker, but I know the chief whip expounded just now on the actions of the speaker, but on the 29th, as was stated in the press statement last night by the leader of the opposition, there were a number of government MPs who were not behaving parliamentary, right? And subsequently, of course, the APNU-AFC sent that a motion, which was not read this afternoon, by the way. But your thoughts on the speaker's position on this the entire matter? Because for me, I didn't see him sanctioning or speaking to the members of the other side.
I think what they're trying to do is to fish for a way to have the motion just not be heard and read in the National Assembly. And I think they find themselves in a very ticklish situation. And so what they have done is try to isolate what they deem to be unparliamentary and bring that just against the opposition members of Parliament, where, as the Chief Whip just said, the Speaker had no control of Parliament on the 29th, and it wasn't just opposition MPs that were standing and on the floor, and the government MPs were also a part of that. And so the decision by the government Chief Whip to just isolate it to a few incidents, completely negating everything that the government MPs would have been involved in, I think is ludicrous. And any unbiased speaker would see that and recognize that if they're dealing with privileges and what happened on the 29th, it cannot be a one-sided affair. And so the motion, I think there was an attempt not to have to deal with the motion in the same way that that Gail Teixeira tried to deal with her particular motion. But at some point they will have to deal with it. If it is that he disallows it, and I think that is what they're going to try to do, find a way to disallow it, it would clearly show what we have been saying all along, the complete biasness of the speaker not to deal fairly with the National Assembly and the what happened in the National Assembly on any given day. So the ball is in his court where that is concerned, and we'll see how he deals with it.
Yeah. I don't know if you can offer some insight, MP, but I'm looking here at the composition of the Privileges Committee. Brigadier, the chair of the committee, of course, is Manzoor Nadir, Brigadier Mark Phillips, Priya Manik Chan, Charles Ramson, Sanjeev Dattadine. On the opposition side, Royzil Ford, Nicholas Henry, David Patterson, and Coretta MacDonald. Were any of those opposition MPs name called in the 8th?
As far as I am aware, no, none of them are in the 8th. But
Okay.
in among the list that we sent to the speaker, some of those are on the government MPs are on the Privileges Committee. So, for example, Mark Phillips, who is on that committee, he and Charles Ramson. They're
Yeah.
both on the Privileges Committee, and their names were mentioned in our motion, which requires that they should be part of the they should be sent to the Privileges Committee.
So how in a case like that, how does the privilege committee deal with its own members? How-
I, that would be an interesting that would be an interesting thing how it will be dealt with. I think there are a number of we may have to have a special committee, or we may have to ask for some persons to be removed and changed so that we can deal with the issues that arise at that committee in a somewhat unbiased manner, as unbiased as you can get in that particular circumstance. But maybe some changes may have to be made once the House agrees that the members that we requested to go to the Privileges Committee actually go there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, MP Tabitha Sarbu Haley, for your perspective this afternoon as we continue to look at what is happening at Parliament. I think we still have Mark Benchcop standing by. I want to see if we can bring him in now. Is Mark still there? I don't know if the operator can bring in. No, Mark is not there at the moment. I think we'll go back to what is happening on the floor. I want to just clarify something from the Chief Whip, if he's still around, because he did mention that they will resubmit the motion. Is that what he said? Just to confirm, after the lunch break, you plan on resubmitting the motion?
Right. So, Randy, just for clarity for your viewers as well, there isn't a requirement to resubmit the motion because the motion is in the House. The Speaker, Manzo Nadir, acknowledged receipt of the motion. He said, and I quote, that he didn't have the opportunity to read it. And as I mentioned, the motion is simply five paragraphs. That's it. It's not a lengthy motion. So it is expected that perhaps right now, as we are in session, he can read that motion. We will break for lunch or snack in a few minutes. He will have an hour opportunity to read it then. And it is expected, that is the argument we're going to declare and the Speaker with in a few minutes, that when we recommence the sitting after that break, is that we go to that motion, so we are allowed to read it out. If the Speaker does not allow for that motion, which thus far has been properly put, right? The motion has been properly put. It has a mover, it has a seconder. The Speaker acknowledged that he has the motion, but he said he didn't have an opportunity to read it. That is since about an hour ago. The motion is with him since 12 o'clock. It is now 5 or 10 minutes to 4. So is the Speaker saying that he has a reading problem, that it takes him more than 4 hours to read 5 paragraphs? And then we will have a break just now. So our position is that when we come back from that break, which should be about 5 o'clock this afternoon, that motion to send 22 members of the People's Progressive Party, civic members, to the Privileges Committee, which includes the Prime Minister of Guyana and the Government Chief Whip Gail Teixeira and the Attorney General amongst others, will come up, it will be read, and it will also go to the Privileges Committee. His failure to do that today will confirm what we have said on many programs and what we have articulated in the motion of no confidence in the Speaker. So all and sundry should be watching. The ball is officially in the Speaker's court. On one hand, you have a motion of no confidence because people are saying, the members of the opposition are saying that you are biased, you're impartial. And here it is that you have a motion that is before the floor, properly put, in keeping with the standing order. And will you allow that motion to be read? Your failure to have that motion read confirms the no confidence that we place in the Assembly. So the ball is in the Speaker's court.
Thank you very much, Chris. I see we have, and thank you for that clarification too, because we were wondering whether or not you had to resubmit that motion. Mark, I know you've been listening to what has played out this afternoon in Parliament. Give an opportunity for your general thoughts. I know you heard from MP Sarbon and the Chief Whip. What are your thoughts at this moment?
I hope you're hearing me clearly now, but let me say what the Chief Whip just said in describing Manzoor Nadir, who, by the way, I believe that there should be a soup named after him. But that's another story, a soup named after Manzoor Nadir. Because Manzoor Nadir is not a serious Speaker of the National Assembly. Are you hearing me, Randy? Yeah, Manzoor Nadir is not a fair Speaker of the National Assembly. Manzoor Nadir doesn't believe in democracy. And I would hope that my friends them in the opposition MPs, would not want to, and this is with all due respect to all of them, to spend much energy on trying to sell the type of person Manzoor Nadir is to the general populace. It's because the majority of Guyanese see Manzoor Nadir for who he is. And we do not expect anything better from Manzoor in Parliament. You have a 6'2" person, 2 inches person in the form of a Chris Jones, who actually had to measure himself out and remind us that he's 6'2", right? Standing there. Manzoor Nadir can't pretend that he hasn't seen Christopher Jones standing there, the Chief Whip, did not acknowledge the Chief Whip until the Chief Whip had to remind him that he's standing there. Manzoor Nadir is and has been a failure of a Speaker of the National Assembly. He doesn't represent the interest of the Guyanese people. He's unfair. He's definitely biased. He doesn't believe in democracy. And he is probably, and he will go down as the worst Speaker of the National Assembly. Now, getting back to this motion that was filed, the Chief Whip did say, and the Speaker of the National Assembly did admit that they were in receipt of this motion. He reviewed it with the Clerk of the National Assembly. However, they realized that the letterhead, there was some questionable letterhead, which means that he knows exactly what the contents are of that email. All was needed was for it to be resubmitted, right? So it is not that he has to take time to go and read what the contents are. He already knows what the contents are. So he's just playing a masquerade, a game. And at the same time, he's trying to insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people. We're not having that. Not only the members of Parliament can see right through him, the opposition members of Parliament, most Guyanese, most of us can see right through Manzoor Nadir. Now, here's what's going to happen quickly. He's going to want to make it appear that he believes in democracy because he knows that all eyes are on him right now. He's going to want it to appear as though that he's giving the opposition members of Parliament equal time and a fair chance. So don't be surprised once this gone to a select committee in terms of throwing the names of the opposition members, he's disciplining them. He doesn't care about discipline. If Manzoor Nadir is concerned about discipline, then those opposition MPs who were misbehaving, they are the ones who were misbehaving. They're the ones who were vulgar in Parliament. They were the ones who were mischievous in Parliament. And therefore, they should be sent to the select committee, not the opposition members of Parliament who are merely standing up for democracy, who are merely standing up and representing not the interest of opposition people, but the interest of all Guyanese. Manzoor, you're not fooling me. You're not fooling the opposition members of Parliament. And by extension, you are not fooling the Guyanese people, Manzoor Nadir. Stop it.
You know, Mark, what is very instructive. I was in Parliament on the 29th. And when the opposition MPs started the protests, the Speaker adjourned. What's adjourned? He didn't suspend it. He adjourned it. Well, he suspended adjourned. I can't remember the exact wording. But there was a halt in the proceedings. At that point in time, the Speaker went outside to speak with whoever. You know, the people believe he went to speak with the government MPs. But during that time, he did not consult with the opposition. He didn't call the chief whip and said, Chief McMahon, what's going on here? So how can we solve this problem? When he was asked by the media whether or not he consulted the chief whip, he said calls were made, but they went unanswered. The chief whip was standing in the well of the National Assembly all of the time. The speaker went outside. He consulted with whoever. He came back in, and they came with a plan to surround the Minister of Finance to ensure that he finished the reading of the bill. That is what they did. And that is why the MPs said, you know what? Well, we ain't going to get anywhere here. We got to pull this mess out of the house and stop the proceedings.
You know, you said that the MPs, the opposition MPs, were protesting. They weren't protesting. They were standing up and doing exactly what they had been paid to do, to represent the people. It's not a protest. They simply said that if this bill is going to be passed, let it be done properly. Let it be done in the name of democracy. And I don't know who held on to whatever mace, but that's another story, because you cannot have an artificial mace sitting there and pretending as though you're passing bills, and then the members of parliament are on their feet and these sort of things. It just cannot happen. That is why I'm saying that Manzoor Nadir is the head of a circus. He is running a circus. He doesn't believe in democracy. He doesn't believe in giving opposition members of parliament a fair chance to represent their constituency. And so, you know, I don't like to waste much energy on people like Manzoor Nadir, who is basically just putting on a show, a big show. But he will be exposed. In fact, a lot of people already see it, that he is a rank and file PPP operative. He's a PPP activist parading as Speaker of the National Assembly. Just a waste of taxpayers' dollars. Look,
parading as if he's a partial arbiter in an impartial arbiter in this entire thing, which is the disgraceful part of it, because the entire country sees exactly what is happening.
You know what they do, Randy? They sit and they plan this thing. They sit and they know how they are going to execute these things. So they sat down. He sat down with his operators, his guys, and they plan how this is going to work out today, how they're going to handle the motion being put forward by the chief whip and these sort of things. They're playing games with democracy. But you know, they have a saying, Moona run till what? They catch up. Manzoor, Moona run till they catch you. We already know what you're about. Yeah. You're not about democracy. You're not about country. You're about self. That is what it is. Hence my reason for saying there should be a soup named after Manzoor Nadir.
The ultimate soup drinker.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said that there should be a soup named after him. I don't want to be sent to a select committee, you know, Randy.
Let me jump back in here, Mark, quickly. In 2 days' time, we will hear the reading of the 2022 budget. And leading up to the budget, I know at the regional level, because I'm a regional councillor for region number 4, RDC 4, and I know about what has played out over the last few months in terms of consultation for those budgets. And of course, under the line item for the regions, you will see a number of allocations. And I will say to you that the councillors had no say in that. This was done through central government and their basket carrier at the region, the REO, Donald Gajraj. But I'm saying to you, this has happened across the country, and this speaks to the PPP's dictatorial tendency, right? So we will have a budget that has little consultation, little input from the people that actually matter on the ground. Your thoughts on budget 2022 and your expectations?
Well, I don't expect a lot other than the rhetoric, other than the usual matinee show, as we say on the quarantine. The PPP they do not believe in consultation. So don't, you guys as regional councillors and so forth, or even the opposition, they don't consult with the opposition. They don't consult with councillors like yourself. They don't consult with the people. They don't believe in that. And so they meet maybe at Freedom House, maybe at some rum shop, maybe somewhere that they sit, and that is how they intend to, that is how they have been running that country since they've been installed into office. They don't believe in consultation. You name one thing that they have consulted the people on. Forget about the opposition, since they don't want to consult the opposition, right? Which in fact they should. But you name one issue that they have gone to the people to consult the people on. So this budget is going to be filled with promises upon promises of things that they plan to do that they will never deliver. I've noticed the opposition is talking and calling on them to, they promise free education. Let us see if that is going to become a reality. In fact, I do believe there should have been free education since during the coalition time. But this is what the PPP campaigned on. Free education all the way to the university level. Let us see if they're going to deliver on that.
Mark,
Let us see if they're going
to tell you that they don't know where the banner come from. They don't know where the banners that say free education come from, like what they did with the 50% increase. Hold on.
Maybe they were just talking about free education for anyone who wants to go to IFLAT University. You never know.
Interesting, but we see that, and I agree with you. The lack of consultation. I mean, they use this hogwash kind of argument that the opposition wasn't recognizing them. This is why they're not including them on state boards, and they're not including them on the COVID task force. A whole heap of nonsense. But at the end of the day, of course, we know what the PPP is about.
Randy. And sorry. In fact, it's an approach that they've always had since they've been installed. That in order for them to cooperate, that the opposition should recognize them. The opposition doesn't have to recognize you guys. And I hope Irfan is watching. They don't have to recognize you guys. Invite the opposition to boards, to state boards, or even part of the CDC, the COVID-19 task force. They don't want input from opposition people. They don't want to consult with the people of the country because they feel they know it all, and they don't. Look at what the so-called health advisor, who is now chairman of GPHC, is saying, that there will be one healthcare system. Leslie Ramsamy. This is coming from a man who wrecked the health sector when he was a questionable and a highly controversial minister of health. He's back again to do the same thing, to wreck the system. Look at how they have been as it pertains to the COVID-19 situation in the country. Over 1,000 plus persons have died since they took office. Every day now over the past month, 7 persons, 5 persons, 6 persons, 8 persons are dying out like flies in that country. They don't give a damn about the people. Just like you've asked about the budget, they don't give a damn about the ordinary people in this budget, but they're going to package it and pretend as though when they talk to their support base or people who are not their support base, to pretend as though this package is such a sweet deal and it is the best the country has ever had, and that the PPP believes in the people and so forth and so on. It's fake. It's a lie. It's a facade. Don't believe the hype. Don't buy into them.
As we talk about budget, I think we have the Shadow Minister of Finance standing by, Jurita, the Honorable.
Hey, but can I say thank you so much for your time? I got to cut out.
Good man. It was always a pleasure. Randy. Always a pleasure, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Great. We're going to be joined by Jurita Fernandes, who is the Shadow Minister of Finance. Of course, the budget is upcoming on Wednesday. We will be hearing the reading of the 2022 budget if the operator has Jurita in place. We want to talk about a few things that we should expect in the budget, things that would have played out over the last year or so as we look at the financial situation in the country. Of course, we're talking there with Mark Benchcup. We want to say thank you very much to him, the MPs who came on the show. We're going to be, after Jurita, we're going to go back to what is happening live in the House as we continue to focus on what is happening in Parliament. Folks, the national budget is scheduled to be read on a Wednesday. Wednesday, folks, and we'll be keeping our eyes peeled. We'll be keeping our ears to the ground as to what is going to be read there in that budget. And of course, we'll have Jurita Finance to help us break down. After Wednesday, of course, we will be having continuous programming talking about the outcomes, the things that come out of that national budget. Folks, public servants, 7%. Over 2 years, works out to about 3.5% per year. Right? At the same time, simultaneously, at the same time, sugar workers given more and more handouts. Right? We see the skyrocketing cost of living, the cost of greens, the cost of groceries, the cost of everything has gone up. Of course, and over the last 2 years, this PPP installed regime has managed to give the public servants only 3.5%. Folks, we're going to ask our operator to bring in the next guest. Just a reminder here, a programming note, as I'm just reminded that at 5 p.m. this afternoon, we will be live with the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton. He's going to be on all of our platforms as we talk about the real state of the economy, the Guyanese economy. We're going to be talking economics. We're going to be talking with the leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, as we discuss what is happening. We have to talk economics because the budget is about to come up. Guyanese are suffering, as Shara Duncan would say, things tight. So we have to talk economics. The PNCR would have put out their list of demands for the national budget, which includes a slew of measures, including a temporary or interim 10% increase for public servants. In the meantime, as you discuss with the unions, you need to give the public servants something else, because to help them brace the hard times that they're going through with the rising cost of living. So there are a number of measures that I want to discuss with the leader of the PNCR this afternoon at 5. So set your alarm so you'll be part of that. You can contribute in the comment sections, of course, as usual, to that conversation. 5 p.m. on all of our programs, all of our platforms, that interview with the leader of the PNCR. Thank you very much for joining us, the Honorable Jurita Fernandes, Shadow Minister of Finance. Jurita, good afternoon and welcome.
Good evening, Randy. Good evening to all the viewers.
Jurita, hearing us?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. Are you hearing me?
We seem to be having some technical difficulty there with Jurita. I don't know if...
Can you hear me now, Randy?
Yes, we hearing you.
Okay. And I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Yes, Rita, you there?
Confirm that you're hearing me, please.
Hello. Mic test 1 2, Jurita.
Good afternoon.
I think we are having some technical difficulties over here, maybe. Yeah, I think it is on our end that we're having some technical difficulties. Yeah, I know the operator is saying that she is hearing us, but we may be experiencing some technical difficulties on my end. Jurita, if you can hear me, let me just give you a question, because I think the audience can hear you. Your expectations of the budget, which should be read in 2 days' time, as the Shadow Minister of Finance, what are your expectations?
I expect a continuation of what we have been seeing since August 2020. I expect nothing different coming from the PPP. I expect a budget that will completely neglect the working class of this country. All the other budgets that they've presented thus far has been completely neglecting the working class of Guyana. And I believe that this budget is just going to be a continuation of that. I expect to see, of course, the largest budget ever. We have to acknowledge that this is the very first budget that will be utilizing oil resources. No other government before had a budget that utilized oil resources. So it will be a large budget. But I can assure the Guyanese people that I will be coming back here and I will be speaking to you again and I will be telling you that just as we expect, all resources will be directed into the pockets of the already rich and wealthy. I expect that the gap in the income distribution in this country would only be widened. The rich will be getting richer, the poor will be getting poor. I expect to see absolutely nothing that is people-centered. I expect that we will not see any significant increase in wages or salaries, if any at all. The administration has shown us that they have very little care about the public servants of this country. I expect to see monies being directed into the pockets of the few I'm talking about. I call them the gang. There's this gang. And when we talk about this little gang, we're just talking about the upper class within the private sector. I like to make the differentiation when we talk about the private sector, that we're not referring to small and medium-sized businesses. Those persons also are left out of any meaningful resource distribution in this country. We do not expect to see anything that is going to be lifting the standard of living of Guyanese in this country. The PPP does not seem to care about the standard of living of the ordinary Guyanese and the working class of this country. And basically, that is what I expect. What I can tell persons supporters that we expect it to be nicely packaged. We expect to have a very nice title on the budget. And we expect that Ashley Singh is going to stand up for hours and take us through a lot of political gap. That is what we expect. There will be nothing to that. Will be no substance to those conversations. And at the end of the day, Guyanese will continue to suffer. The cost of living in this country will continue to skyrocket because all policies that they have been directing thus far to the people of this country none of them has been geared at actually reducing the cost of living so persons can actually enjoy a better life in this country.
You're going to hear that it's the largest budget ever. That's the, you always hear it. It's the largest budget ever. It's the most amazing budget in the history of budgets. But let us talk about, I know you mentioned the cost of living and the price of things on the market. Do you believe that this regime has done enough to ease the stress placed on Guyanese by the rising cost of groceries and other things in the market?
Randy, I don't agree with your choice of words. I believe that this regime has not done anything, not enough. I believe that they have done absolutely nothing to alleviate or to aid in rising costs of living altogether. We have the PPP came into office in August of 2020. This is 2022. Public servants got a 7% increase. The income tax threshold was not increased thus far. We have food prices at over 14% increase in the cost of basic food items within the home. The PPP has done absolutely nothing with the flood that occurred when farmers suffered. The government came to the National Assembly and they sought to have $10 billion to actually distribute to help to alleviate the damage, the costs that would have been suffered by the farmers. There's widespread reports of corruption in that process. I say once again that the PPP has done absolutely nothing to aid in the alleviation of the rising cost of living in this country.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something that you would have mentioned when we were both on Sherrod Duncan's podcast, Below the Belt, when you spoke about the impact of that corruption in that a number of farmers who were supposed to be receiving the aid and relief did not get it. So the impact of that corruption, we're now seeing that impact in these rising prices on the market because the farmers didn't get the relief that they needed. So now the consumers are bearing the brunt of that at the shops. And whether it be COVID, whether it be the farmers the farmers, the flood relief grant. We continue to see this rampant corruption, and yet to see any report coming out of the Auditor General. Your thoughts on that, and if you can zone in on that, the specific impact of the corruption on the prices.
Randy, what you're speaking about is something that I actually spoke about on several platforms prior. But just to repeat for the viewers right now, what I can say is that when that $10 billion was when the government came to the National Assembly rather for approval of the $10 billion, the intent, as they would have said, is to give to farmers that lost in crops when there was a flood. Now, what they actually did is went out and with the utilization of a lot of their political hacks within the regions, and I have persons that can testify to this. They went out, and persons that never planned a blade of grass in their life being called in to receive monies from that $10 million, when they're persons that are farmers, legitimate farmers, were a lot of them were not in receipt of 1 cent of that money. So what happened is that when persons that actually do farming, they actually suffered losses, and they were not compensated in any way by those monies. They were not able to actually inject money back into farming. So we had a market on responding in such a way that it did, and you would have seen we're still seeing the rise of planting. We had a rise of shallot, we had a rise in Bora, and we saw the market respond in that manner. But what the government did, those reports of corruption, we felt it in that manner, because persons that received the monies that did not even own a farm, those monies should have been put into the farmers' pocket so they can reinvest in agriculture. But again, I say the corruption within this administration is crazy. I think one of the words that we use in the National Assembly that the Speaker actually barred us from using is kleptomania, basically a government of thieves. We see this every single day. We cannot just pretend that it's okay. Taxpayers' dollars are being squandered. We are seeing poor people in this country suffering. The majority of persons living in Guyana is the working class citizens of this country, and those are the persons that are being affected by these draconian policies. We are simply standing up and we're saying that this is enough. We cannot continue like this. I expect that their budget will not facilitate any change as to what is going on right now. The government has shown us time and time again that they are only concerned with implementing policies of trickle-down economics. And trickle-down economics has been proven not only in Guyana but throughout the world to be a failed economic policy and concept altogether. But yet we have in Guyana the PPP administration bringing to the floor time and time again in all of their discourse, they would go and say that if they give monies to this group of persons, they'll be able to do so many things, and the money will eventually trickle down to the working class of this country. It has never happened. It has not happened in Guyana and any other part of this world, and it will not start to happen in 2022. We need policies that are people-centered. We need policies that are aimed at bread and butter matters, and we are not seeing those policies right now. When the APNUFC administration was in office, persons would recall that every year the budget was so intact when it came to bread and butter matters. Persons could have expected every single year retroactive salary increases. Persons expected every year increase in the income tax threshold, and might I add that the APNUFC administration throughout their 5 years in office had perfect total control over inflation. The last year, the APNUFC administration in office, there was an inflation rate of 0.5. That is practically no inflation at all. These things need to be acknowledged. These things are directly impacting the working class of this country. And right now, the PPP have absolutely no clue as to how to get these things done, as the APNUFC would have done throughout the 5 years in office.
Before I let you go, MP, recently the installed vice president said he noted 3 things, and I want to get your take on these 3 before you go. One, that the global pandemic is the major cause for the slow movement of the economy outside of the oil sector. Secondly, he said that that global food prices were on the increase, and Guyana is now feeling the effect of that. I don't know if we don't produce our own food. And thirdly, he said that the PPP created numerous amounts of jobs in over the last year and a half in power. Your reaction to those three things?
Well, first I can say that the PPP administration has done a phenomenally worse job at managing COVID-19 in this country. Today we are listed among the 20 countries that stay at the level 4 status when it comes to COVID-19. Persons are advised not to travel here. So that goes to the level of management of COVID. Do not tell me about global prices being seen here and the global food prices increases. That's what we're feeling here. When we're not importing plantain is not being imported. We produce plantain right here. Okay, the global food prices doesn't affect plantain in Guyana, producing Guyana. Corruption is what affects it here. That is as simple as it gets. If you don't give the people that produce plantains, if you don't cushion the effect that they felt from floodings and so directly, and you give them the money that was intended to go to them, the person that does not produce plantains, you will see what we're seeing here today. Not global food prices. And thirdly, I believe if you can remind me, Randy, were you talking about jobs? I can't
They
remember.
said they did a phenomenal job on job creation, so to speak. Do we see this reflecting in the economy?
Okay, so I noted that I saw a report saying that that he mentioned that they have created more jobs than the AFC administration did. I just want to note at this point that the Bureau of Statistics is saying differently. The Bureau of Statistics is saying right now our unemployment rate is higher than it was under the APNU AFC administration. That simply means that more persons are unemployed now than were under the APNU AFC administration. I listened to many reports coming out, and it is amazing that persons believe that in 2022, with all with technology booming, the information age, basically persons still come and tell blatant lies to the population, and persons should be gullible to believe it. I think we have. I'm very proud of Guyanese at this point in time. I see persons going out there doing research more, and I see a lot of times, especially on social media, when these reports are being made and these statements are being made, people, the comment sections are very interesting to read because persons are refuting those claims and they're saying, hey, well, we have different facts. And another thing, I know you didn't mention it, but another thing that was mentioned in news reports is that he also said that persons have more disposable income right now, which is a joke. It's not only a lie, but it's a joke. And I think it's an insult to the intelligence of Guyanese to believe that you can come to persons in 2022 and make those statements and they would buy into it. And I am extremely happy once more to say that Guyanese are not having it. And the comments that are coming under those posts, it's amazing. I am so proud of Guyanese because persons know that they are feeling hardship right now. Persons know that with living in Guyana, the oil producing Republic of Guyana, as we call it, living in Guyana has never been harder. Persons are starving whilst we have a selected few in our society getting richer and enjoying this great, fabulous life. The resources of this country are not being distributed equally, and we see absolutely no intention of the PP administration to even attempt to distribute those resources so that the working class of this country would actually benefit from it.
Thank you very much, MP Jirita Fernandes, Shadow Minister of Finance, for quite an insightful discussion there on the state of our economy. We'll continue this discussion this afternoon with the leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, on what is really happening in our economy, and we'll get his take on it. But we want to thank you. I know you have to go back to the business in the house, so we're happy that you're able to join us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Randy, and good evening to all your listeners. I'll be back at my nearest convenience.
Thank you very much. Great. Folks, we had there the Opposition Shadow Minister of Finance, the Honorable Jirita Fernandes, giving us some insight there on her expectations for the budget 2022, and of course, debunking some of the lies and the myths put forward by the installed PVP about this economy and this where we are right now in terms of the markets. Folks, we want to ensure that you are getting what is happening there in Parliament. So right now we'll go back to the Parliament live from the floor. At 5 p.m. we'll break the transmission and we'll come to you with the true state of the Guyanese economy with my special guest, Aubrey Norton, the leader of the PNCR. Of course, it's a Russia Business Report special feature, of course, bringing to you the thoughts and the perspectives of the leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton. That's at 5 o'clock. So we'll go back to the house, and then at 5 p.m. we'll come back with that interview with Mr. Aubrey Norton. Folks, you're live. APN UFC TV. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Continued broadcast throughout the day as we lead into Budget 2022. Of course, 5 o'clock, and then of course at 8 we'll have In the Ring with Richard Duncan. We'll break down more of this. Operator will take the what's happening in the house until we are ready for that interview at 5.
Use of organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids. 3. Facilitate, coordinate, and manage the procurement, storage, preservation, distribution, and delivery of organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids. 4. For implementing quality assurance programs, including donor quality assurance program, with regular audits for ongoing and monitoring and evaluation of that program. 5, to ensure that patients and their relatives have appropriate information and opportunities to consider whether to consent to the donation of organs, tissues, cells, or biofluids, and to facilitate the provision of that information. Mr. Speaker, the PPPC government has a track record of transparency and accountability, and hence will also ensure that a national donor and transplant registry be established. This registry will be responsible for mainly for registering 1, consents and amendments and revocation of consents of adults respecting the donation of their organs, tissue, cells, or biofluids and cell explants or cell lines. 2, for patients awaiting transplantation of organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids, and recipients of organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids. The registry shall have facility for both in-person and online registration of donors. The agency also shall establish and manage a register of patients waiting for the transplantation of organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids. They will also ensure that medical criteria for allocating organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids and substances derived from scientific procedures involving organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids, and a system to fairly and equitably allocate available tissue, cells, organs, and biofluids, and any scientific procedures involving organs, tissues, cells, and biofluids. Mr. Speaker, clearly, this bill was drafted with a visionary and comprehensive approach that will allow beneficiaries, whether donors, recipients, healthcare providers, and the population at large, to experience a new era of scientific, medical, and analytic approach to the management of human organ and tissue transplantation service in Guyana. This is a bill that will create easier avenues or access to life-saving and best practices in the donation of organs, tissues, or biofluids for patients all across Guyana. And I therefore fully support this bill. I encourage my colleagues on the opposite side, please read this bill and go through each and every word, read and understand, and you will see why this bill needs to be passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Dr. Thandika Smith. And now I want to invite the Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Member, Mr. Lennox Schumann, to make his contribution.
Mr. Speaker, I want to first say thank you for this opportunity and a massive happy 2022 to not only the listening public, but to all my colleagues in this honorable House. In 2016, I lost one of my cousins to diabetes. She was in the hospital, struggling, and it was really painful. In 2018, I lost an aunt to cervical cancer. That too was painful. And these are illnesses that continue to plague many Indigenous communities. I think if you were to look at the stats, Indigenous women are more prone to cervical cancer compared to others on the coast. And I want to commend the government at this juncture on bringing this piece of legislation before this House. On a bill, Mr. Speaker, it is very fantastic technical language, you know, stuff that lawyers in themselves would have to dissect and decipher. So I will try to contextualize it for the layman. And maybe I'll start and end because I'm very, very succinct. I think that there are components in this bill that I look forward to the government making it a reality. That where there is a storage facility, that storage facility is not confined to Georgetown, but that it goes across the entire country. And with a storage facility should come the kind of infrastructure to support such storage, whether it be electrification, power generation, transport, and obviously it has to be accessible to all Guyanese. The contextualization of this piece of legislation, and I will start December 30th, 2021, and it's in a small tale, a short tale. A good doctor was watching the news and he saw that this bill was going to be tabled. So he decided to jump into the future. And he goes all the way up to 2050. And he says, you know what, we're tabling a piece of legislation in Parliament, and I want to be informed so that we could stop, I'd say, a slide, per se. So he goes into the future, Mr. Speaker, and they started brain transplants at that time. And the brains were on sale. For a rocket scientist was $1 million. For a university graduate was $500,000. And for politicians of a certain ilk, I'm not going to divine, the cost was free. So the doctor was really baffled. Why is a politician's brain of a certain ilk free? So he went to the counter and asked, sir, why is this brain free? The guy said, if you look at the rocket scientist, his brain is filled. You could take that brain and put it anywhere. University graduate, they still have a lot more growing, so we kind of medium value that. But some politicians never use their brain. That's why it's free. To contextualize the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not casting aspersions on any of my colleagues in this House, I am happy to know that this bill looks to the future. So the doctor came back and said, well, I'll help the government draft this bill and let's get it on. So I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, and once again, my compliments to the government for bringing this bill. It is my sincere hope that all of the things that are contained in this bill are given equal access by all indigenous communities to address the cervical cancer issues and many other health issues that continue to plague many indigenous communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I now invite the Honorable Member, Attorney General Anil Nandlal, to make his contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we said in our manifesto and repeatedly during our elections campaign that in this government, this 5-year, we will begin, or rather continue, the modernization of our legislative landscape in almost every area of human endeavor. The public health sector, Mr. Speaker, is most important on the government's agenda for obvious reasons. And therefore, the public health sector will be the target of massive modern reforms in the years to come. This is only a single step in that direction. Mr. Speaker, this is obviously a very complex, a highly expert, and a very sophisticated piece of legislation. As we have heard from the experts in the field, from the mouth of the Honorable Minister himself, Dr. Frank Anthony, from the Honorable Member Vishwa Mahadev, and from the Honorable Member Dr. Karen Cummings, transplant, blood transfusion, and the implantation of bodily organs have been with us for decades. Some statistics suggest even centuries. And we have been doing it in Guyana, according to the Honorable Minister, since 2008 in terms of bodily organs, and way before that in relation to blood transfusion. However, we were doing it in a very unregulated way. And the medical profession felt that the time has come for us to bring infrastructural regulation to the way that this science was being done in our country. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that this bill was completely inspired and worked on by our medical profession, the medical experts of our country. There was no political hand here. There was not, while the Honorable Member Minister was generous and charitable enough to recognize the efforts of the Attorney General Chambers, we were merely the scribe as we took the specific and very complex instructions from those who are qualified in the areas to give it. And Mr. Speaker, this bill, like many others that we will bring, enjoys a very, very long and consultative process. The Honorable Minister listed a constellation of medical personnel, both in and out of Guyana, and organizations that contributed significantly to this effort. And Mr. Speaker, having regard to certain statements made by the Honorable Member Dr. Cummings, I want to specifically reiterate for the record that the expertise from the Guyana Medical Association, the Medical Association of Guyana and the medical profession itself, there was, in fact, a unit established bearing the name Human Organ and Tissue Transplant Bill that was formed to pilot this process, and they worked closely with the drafting team. In particular, Mr. Speaker, we got expert guidance from PAHO and WHO advisory team of experts on transplantation and blood services. And this came and in the process, Mr. Speaker, we consulted Trinidad and Tobago, which has had such a legislation since the year 2000. We were doing this 21 years after that. Obviously, we looked at Trinidad, and any person acquainted with how drafting is being done, you borrow what exists before, with a view, of course, to improve it based upon the developments that would have taken place since that was done in that country. And we did that with Trinidad and Tobago, and we got expert guidance from Dr. Hasina Mohammed. And that person helped and showed us where we needed to improve from the Trinidad model. So the Honorable Member, Dr. Karen Cummins' statements that we copied from Trinidad and we mimicked Nicolette Henry, or the Honorable Member Nicolette Henry, is completely uninformed. Yes, we borrowed from Trinidad as we borrowed from the United States of America, as we borrowed from Canada, as we borrowed from the United Kingdom, as we borrowed from the European Community, as we borrowed from Belgium, as we borrowed from Croatia, as we borrowed from India. Nothing is wrong with that. There is no need to reinvent the wheel when there is a model that you can work with, you can massage, and you can get it to meet the peculiarities and idiosyncrasies of your society. That is how laws are drafted all across the world, and there is nothing wrong with that. Mr. Speaker, this bill captures the basic international requirements that such a bill must contain. And they are set out in great details right across from the beginning to the end of the bill. The bill is numbered pages up to pages 75. It's not a small bill. And the reason why it is so elaborate, the reason why it is so comprehensive, is because of the nature of the task at hand and the complexity of the issues. So all the issues that we have heard about children's rights, about consent, about prohibition, they are all captured in the bill. For example, I heard the Honorable Dr. Karen Cummins lamenting the fact that the bill does not contain an adequate regime of provisions that relate to prohibition against illegal transfer or unauthorized use of bodily organs. And that is not true. That is simply not true. Part 10 of the bill deals specifically with that. It has a series of offenses, and it continues on to the miscellaneous section for about 4 or 5 pages, simply listing offenses. So a person shall not remove or cause to be removed any organ, tissue, blood, blah, blah, blah. And any person who does that commits an offense and shall be liable on a conviction to a fine of 5 million and to imprisonment for 5 years. Any person who advertise the donation, put advertisements in relation to the selling or buying commits an offense. Any person who unauthorizedly removes or performs one of these operations commits an offense. And there are a series of offenses here. And these offenses are what would have been in all standard pieces of legislation that exist across the Commonwealth and in the United States of America. So I don't understand what is the basis for you making that statement, honorable member. The honorable member looked at Trinidad and Tobago. I took a photograph of the Trinidad and Tobago legislation that the honorable member referred to, and the honorable member made a comparison with our bill at clause 51 and said that we borrowed it from Trinidad, but that our own contains a mistake which Trinidad doesn't have. But let me read our bill, and then I'll read the Trinidad version of it. Any contract or arrangement is void under which a person agrees for valuable consideration, whether given or to be given to the person or to another person, A, to the sale or supply of any organ, tissue, cell, or blood or other biofluid from the person's body or from the body of another person, or, and this is the objectionable part, to the sale or supply of blood, whether before or after the person's death or the death of the other person. The honorable member saying that Trinidad doesn't speak to transferal of blood after death because according to her, it's medically impossible for that to be done. That's the impression I got. But listen to what the Trinidadian statute says, the relevant portion. A person, subject to this section, any contract or arrangement under which a person agrees for valuable consideration, whether given or to be given to himself or to another person, to the sale or the supply of any tissue from his body or from the body of another person, or to the sale or supply of blood, whether before or after his death or the death of the other person, as the case may be, is void. The identical thing is captured in our legislation. Identical. Transfusion of blood after death. Yet the honorable member stands with a straight face and says that we copied, but we copied wrong from Trinidad. Where Trinidad has the identical thing. And honorable member, let me explain to you whether or not it is medically possible to transfuse blood after death is not the issue. Any person who does that commits a criminal offense. It has nothing to do with biology, it has to do with a crime. So I am shouting because I can't imagine that a doctor would come to this house and pretend to speak about a bill dealing with medicine and be so misleading. That is the type of irresponsibility that we cannot encourage in the house. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member also had great objection to the minister being given powers to over the agency, and the agency is a very important unit in the infrastructure of this bill. But Mr. Speaker, let me read what those powers are. The minister may, first of all, may, so that's permissive, it's not mandatory, give to the agency any special or general policy directives with respect to the carrying out of its functions under the Act as the minister considers necessary or expedient. What is wrong with a minister who has responsibility for the health sector giving policy directions to an agency of this type? What is wrong with that? That is what the people of Guyana elected this government to do. To govern the country and give policy directions where policy directions are necessary. The honorable member, Cameron Ramjatan, had once portfolio over the police, and that identical statutory formulation is in the Police Act, that the Minister of Home Affairs shall give general and specific policy directions to the police force. Every piece of legislation that has a subject minister will have a linguistic formulation of that type. That is how government exercises governmental policy control over the administration of the state. That is the role of a government. That is why a government is elected by the people of Guyana. So I don't understand how you can find that objectionable. And the worst part of it is, the honorable member stood on that podium and found in this bill that there were some elements here, of course, which he did not dilate and detail for us. Some elements in this bill inspire and encourage ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. Now you have to be of a special mind to read a bill that is so scientific, so clinical, so dispassionate, so sophisticated, so deep in clinical medicine, and unearth from that ethnic cleansing. I don't understand. Something is wrong with some people's minds, Mr. Speaker. Something is wrong. And then the honorable member read into this bill also grave platforms for corruption. This bill has the only part of it that has and accused this government, accused the government, and says that she is not, the honorable member is not sure whether the government will manage this bill and will not make it corrupt. The government has nothing to do with this bill and the management of this bill, other than the minister having a role to give policy directions of a general and special nature. But that is the type of misleading information and misinformation that is disseminated out there, and people believe it. The same thing they have done with the NRF bill. The same thing they have done with the NRF bill, although, as I've said repeatedly, that bill is about 80% their bill. Yet, it's a recipe for corruption and for thieving of resources. That is what they do, Mr. Speaker. They come here, they don't read the bill, or either if they read it, they don't understand it. They don't understand what they read, but they gave their mouth a lot of liberty and contribute to an avalanche of misinformation. Mr. Speaker, this bill protects all the persons in our society who require protection. Our minors, there is a whole regime of protection to ensure that minors' interests are safeguarded. And minor is defined in the bill as a person under 18 years old. And this bill has a series of protective mechanisms. These mechanisms were not hatched up at the chambers of the Attorney General. They were pulled from existing regime of protection across the globe. And I have cited the jurisdiction to which we have taken in order to present this bill. The Honorable Member Dr. Karen Cummins spoke at length about death, but we spent a long time in determining, in prescribing how death is to be determined, because different jurisdictions, based upon the available technology and based upon their, I suppose, philosophy, they have different definition of what constitutes death. The British definition is different from the American definition. The one in Trinidad and Tobago is also different. We carefully constructed one that we felt is conducive and proper and appropriate for the level of technological advancement that exists in Guyana, so that we can properly apply and diagnose death in the most accurate way. And that is captured in clause 47 of the bill, 48 of the bill. A person is considered dead when there has occurred a irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions of that person, or irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including brain stem of that person. This definition alone took us about 3 weeks before we arrived at this. And this received the expert input of a number of persons. The Honorable Member Minister spoke about Professor Kishan Narayan, very celebrated professor at Calvary University. I have his views here when he finished the work and we send the final draft to him. He said this, let me share what he said. He said, generally, this draft of the document is solid and superb as it addresses all aspects of human tissue transplant. This guy, for your information, Professor Kishan Narayan, BSc, MD, PhD, FETCS, Faculty of Medicine, University of Calgary, Libin Cardiovascular Institute of Alberta, Canada, former co-director, Cardiac Transplantation, University of Ghent, Belgium. That is the man's qualifications only, just behind his name. And these are the type of expertise that we had available at our disposal. And we didn't accept their expert recommendation wholesale. Our local medical team sat down with the drafters and ensured that we, in those technical areas, we came up with a formulation of language that would capture what we want peculiarly in our society if we don't want what is generally out there. So, Honorable Member, this bill is comprehensive. It is the most modern expression of its type in the English-speaking Caribbean. We are leading the way in this bill and in this type of medical technology. Mr. Speaker, we also ensure that the bill contains a power vested in the Honorable Minister to promulgate regulations, because a bill of this type has to remain fluid. While we have captured the foundational pillars, the main concepts, and the fundamental precepts of the infrastructure, this bill will be an ongoing, evolving exercise. And the regulatory making power of the minister will allow, obviously upon consultation with our medical fraternity, to allow for there to be appropriate regulations in order to lend expediency and efficiency and efficacy to the letter, spirit, concepts, and conceptual objectives which are captured in this bill. We also had the legal advisor to the Medical Council, Mr. Kamaram Karan, who is now quite experienced in that post, as he has served there for more than a decade. He also brought a legal perspective to the bill. And he discussed it, I'm sure, with his legal counterparts in the legal profession. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is a commendable effort on the part of the government. It is revolutionary. It is groundbreaking. Of course, we may come back here with amendments as we begin to put the bill into force. We don't pretend that this is the perfect first effort. It is the first effort. We have regulatory making powers that will supplement the bill when necessary. But I believe and I'm confident that this is a great first effort, and it will advance the medical and public health welfare of our people and our country. And I have no hesitation in commending this bill to the House. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Attorney General. And at this time, we invite the Honorable Minister of Health to conclude these presentations.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. First of all, allow me to thank all the persons who made contributions to the debate, my colleagues on this side of the House that supported the bill, and the colleagues on the other side of the House who spoke to the bill. I would have thought that a groundbreaking piece of legislation like this would have gotten the unreserved support of everyone in the House. And it is quite unfortunate that the two members who represented the opposition did not support the bill. Nevertheless, I think in their presentations, they did acknowledge that this is a very important piece of legislation. And I want to assure them that, you know, let's think about this in a logical way. Right now, in this country, we are doing transfusion. However, we don't have a specific piece of law that governs transfusion in this country. This bill seeks to remedy that deficiency. So I cannot see what is wrong with us introducing now for the first time, after so many decades of doing transfusion, a piece of legislation to govern how transfusions would be done. As I said in my opening speech, our first transplant was done on the 12th of July, 2008. That's a kidney transplant. Again, we have done about 66 such kidney transplants in this country without any piece of legislation. No legislation in place. This government was the one who thought that it was important for us to put the safeguards in place, put the rules in place, put the law in place, and to specify that if anybody breached these laws, this would be the punishment that they would get. So we are coming from a place where we had nothing, and we are now putting that structure in place. And it is really unfortunate that the members do not understand this and continue to argue. You know, I sometimes I'm trying to decipher what they were really arguing for. Similarly with corneal transplant, we have done 99 of those. And again, nothing in place, we are putting something in place. But, Mr. Speaker, what is even more troubling, the Honorable Dr. Karen Cummins, in the beginning of her presentation, took time off to inform us that she is speaking as a medical doctor and as a public health specialist. And that's commendable. But what is not commendable is that during her presentation, at one point, and I wrote it down here, she pointedly said that this bill has the potential to kill. Nowhere in this bill does it say that we have any potential to kill. What this bill seeks to do is really to prolong the life of people, to give life, because many of the persons who would benefit from kidney transplants are those who would be suffering from end-stage renal disease, and the only alternative other than dialysis is for them to have a transplant. And this is what is going to prolong their life. Right now, for the 66 patients that we have transplanted, and more recently those that we have done last year, among them I think was a 14-year-old child. the mother gave that child her kidney. And because of that donation, that child would have a very long life. When I spoke to them, when I spoke to that family, I recall the distress of that mother. I recall the challenges that that child was facing. And because we were able to do this transplant, that child is going to live for quite a long time. So this thing does not kill people. This is to enhance the quality of life for persons. And that's what this bill is all about. If you take time off to speak with the doctors who have been doing transplant, those that are at the Georgetown Public Hospital, they would tell you how long they were trying to get such a piece of legislation in place. Because if we want to be known as a jurisdiction that is doing proper transplant medicine, then we have to put the legal and ethical framework in place. All the experts, whether from Spain, whether from the US, whether from Canada, the UK, the Caribbean, all the experts that we have consulted, all of them want us to have strong legal and ethical framework in place. That is what this legislation is providing for all of us. And you know, I recall some years ago when we were having one of those debates, and I think when the Deputy Speaker spoke and he spoke about cervical cancer, it reminded me of that incident in this Parliament. Because under the then Minister of Health, Dr. Barry Ramsaran, we had introduced HPV vaccination in this country. And the lead speaker for the opposition at that point in time, Dr. George Norton, got up and made some very outrageous remarks about HPV vaccination in Guyana. And among those remarks was that giving HPV vaccines to the children of this country to protect them from cervical cancer was tantamount to the Tuskegee experiment that happened in the United States. That was what was said in this house. And I remember coming sometime after him and explaining that that's never our intention, because we want to protect the children, especially the women of this country, from cervical cancer. Today, we heard an association somehow between what we are trying to do in terms of transplantation, in terms of regenerative medicine, in terms of cell therapy. That was then somehow taken out of context and misruled. That somehow minorities, somehow this is related to ethnic cleansing, and by inference that maybe we'll take organs from some people and use them in such a program. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say from this floor that that's not the intention of this bill, and it is really abhorrent of a medical practitioner to really come and try to make that type of connection with this bill. It is a shame, it is a travesty, and we should not allow these